Okay, so right now, what I want to talk about is the difference between mainstream book publishing and self publishing models. Now, in previous videos, we've mostly been talking about the magazine pipeline, but I've also been mentioning about how to grow ideas into something bigger. And one of the most obvious ways as a writer to go bigger is to go book. And, really, if you stick around in this business long enough, you sort of have to write a book. It's all about branding. It's about that media. It's about finding a home and for your sort of intellectual content. And a book is even better than a magazine article in sort of establishing yourself. Because if someone Googles you or looks you up, they might find your articles, but they'll definitely find a book. And that becomes like sort of a launching pad for other things you get to do in your career because you've grown out of those short little things on magazines into something bigger, into something that feels meaningful. And there are a lot of different ways to go into publishing. But the big ones are self-publishing. That means you write your own book, you create your own publishing house, which really means just a website, and you put it out on Amazon, Kindle, ebooks. Maybe they print it for you, and then you sell it right to the people. Now, self-publishing, the advantage of it is that you get a lot larger share of the royalties that come out of it. You essentially you have 100% of the potential profits depending how you distribute. Versus mainstream publishing, you get only a tiny fraction of the revenues that come in. It's the difference between 100% in self-publishing to 10 to 15% in mainstream publishing. However, self-publishing has the problem of you put up all the capital, all the editing, the marketing budget, all of that. Whereas mainstream publishing, they are like venture capitalists. They're there to give you money up front so that they can own the rights on the back end of the book and only pay you just a little bit. So I think I'm first going to talk about the mainstream publishing model, how it's been done for at least 100 years in America. So there's a publisher. They loved your idea. They thought it was just the cat's meow. And you've gone through a pitching process with them, which is a little bit similar to the pitching process I described earlier. You wrote a book proposal. That book proposal, not only explained how like awesome your idea was, it gave them that little dopamine hit saying, "Oh my God, this is so exciting." It also had market information of it. Who's going to buy this book? And they, at the end of the day, felt that this has the potential to be a best-selling book that makes them a lot of money. And they want to give you the least possible amount of money to write it. But therein lies the negotiation. We'll go over agents a little bit later. But remember, mainstream publishing houses are venture capital. They give you money up front so that they ameliorate your risk. You have a salary to write it, but you don't make as much money on the back end. Self-publishing is really, really high risk because you're putting everything up front on the bet that at the back end you're going to make a lot more. And that can be sort of scary because all of the marketing, everything runs on you. And honestly, the mainstream media, they sort of look at self-published books as a dime a dozen because they are a dime a dozen and don't take it as seriously. So the publishing house gives it a little more gravitas while self-publishing does not. However, with a really good idea and a good reputation and the right setup, it's possible to take the best of both worlds, where you get some of that downstream revenue from the self-publishing model, but also get the venture capital hit to fund your project up front. And this has to do with selling a great book proposal, and we'll get to how to write one of those later, where you've sold this idea and you've took it out to auction. Because what agents do is what I just told you to do in the pitch process. They take your idea out to 10 different publishers or 20 different publishers, and they say this is the best idea. It's going to make you $1 million, and then they all bid against each other. Ideally, you got more than one offer. And then the value of the book, it comes because they negotiate against each other. And this is why you get $800,000 advances. This is why you get $1 million advances. It's the sense of FOMO, where one publishing house thinks they're going to miss out on the next Eat, Pray, Love, which of course is what you tell them that you're going to write. And hopefully you believe it too, and you're trying to write the next Eat, Pray, Love, Shantaram, whatever mainstream book is out there, that is yours. Now, when you're negotiating rights with those publishers, it's the same principles as I talked about before. You can carve away certain rights from their 70-page book contract, and a good agent will help you do this and help you create your vision. And what I did most recently, and this model has only come after publishing 2 books prior, and then on my 3rd book, What Doesn't Kill Us, I retained the audio rights for my book. And this was super interesting because publishers, oftentimes audiobooks fail miserably. And publishers often will sell those rights, even if they've acquired them, to a third-party publisher for as low as like $1,000 for the rights to publish that audiobook. But instead, I retain the rights to that audiobook and self-published it, which is really not hard. You get a microphone, you get a closet, you get a sound engineer. It costs me about $2,500 to produce that audiobook. And then I had the mainstream release with my publisher of my hardcover at the same time doing my audiobook and reaping the royalties that were possible out of that. And what this is a hybrid model where I still get incentives when I'm publicizing this book later, and I will go into that about how to publicize. But I'm publicizing later the book, and I'm also getting rewards for that as that comes in, because when you get an advance for a book, oftentimes we think a book advance is like you got to hear $100,000. You're like, oh, they got a check for $100,000. Isn't that great? And $100,000 is honestly great, but that's not what it is. Typically, a book advance is $100,000. That means up front, when you sign that contract, they give you $33,000, 1/3 of that advance, and that's all of your money that you have to write the book. Then on delivery of that book, so a year later, 2 years, however long it takes you to write the book, they'll give you another 1/3 of that advance, another $33,000. And then again on publication of the book, which is generally another year after submission of that book. So that's what the $100,000 advance means. Technically it is an advance on royalties. So let's say, and this is very standard, your initial royalties is between 10 and 15%. And if they give you $100,000, you're only getting, if you get a $100,000 advance, that means you don't make any money until that $100,000 is what they call earned out. And at 10% of the book, so if the book is, let's say it's a $30 book, that's what they cost now, that means you're getting $3 off of that advance account for every book that you sell, which means you have to sell a ton of books to earn out the advances. And in general, most books never earn out. Like, it's just sort of the way it is. Most books are not necessarily flops, but don't get to that account, so you never see another check. This is why that hybrid model becomes very important later, because you want to continually be making money, right? You don't just want that one lump check. And by carving up rights, and the ones I think are the best are audio rights, but also foreign rights. You can sell a book again in foreign markets, because usually they'll just buy North America, unless you sold a world right contract, which are really bad usually. But if you sold, you can sell in France, you can sell in England, you can sell in blah, 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 all these other places, Japan, my most recent book, What Doesn't Kill Us, is, I believe, in about 20 countries right now, which is great. That's like a whole nother set of advances. And the more rights you can carve out, the better. Obviously, movie rights, theme parks, t-shirt lines, I don't know, whatever it is, you want to keep as much as you can and think about other sort of revenue streams that come forward. And this is why I think a hybrid model is a lot better than just a straight self-publishing model, because it allows you to have some capital to work with and write the book and still have downstream revenue. Versus that putting everything up front and then not sure where it's going, and also not having the credibility of a mainstream publisher behind you. So, when you get into this, try mainstream, see what you can get, and then also look at self-publishing if that makes sense for you. So I hope that is a useful introduction to the options that are out there for writers. Good luck. And I think next what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about what you want in an agent, and also about how to write a book proposal in the first place. What goes into it? How does the market work? And then we'll talk a little bit about writing books too. Thanks. See you soon.